Recently, I received a powerful question from one of my supporters over on Patreon. They ask, when one has advanced in Buddhism, how would they have changed? Would they have a different or unusual mentality or sense of perceptions? Sometimes I feel like I've been moving forward in Buddhism. Other times I feel that that would be presumptuous posturing. Some explanations of nirvana would seem to indicate that I've attained it or I'm close to it. Others would laugh at this, seeing it as arrogance. My supporter says that he's doing his best to live a good life for himself and others, to harm no one, including myself. I try to see what the Buddha saw. If there's any enlightenment in that, then I've attained it. But if that's all there is, I think the religion promises more than it offers. Now, this is indeed a universal question for practitioners, one that we may ask ourselves even if, at some level, we believe that we shouldn't be asking these kinds of questions. The fact is, we all want to know if we're making progress. We want to know what the goal would be like, what the final destination might feel like. Now, the short answer that I often give to this kind of question is not to worry. Don't worry about attainments. They can become sources of attachment and conceit, comparing ourselves to others. Just do the practices and see where they lead. But clearly, that's not going to be the whole story here. So in this video, we'll explore what early Buddhism actually says about knowing whether or not you're enlightened, why it's so easy to be confused about this, and what true signs of progress might actually look like. My supporter over on Patreon mentioned feeling at times that they were close to nirvana, while conceding that others might laugh at this kind of claim, viewing it as arrogant. This points at one common trap we can all fall into, which is mistaking profound, even blissful experiences for ultimate attainment. Now, while my supporter here didn't specifically mention profound experiences like these, other people in my comments often do. In fact, the ancient Brahmajala Sutta lists a long series of contemplative states that people in the Buddha's day mistakenly identified as ultimate liberation or nirvana. Our minds are actually quite good at generating powerful, pleasant states, even through apparent intellectual understanding or reasoning. For example, we can think of the common eureka moment that we get when we think we've solved a problem. And that eureka is not guaranteed to follow from correct reasoning, although it does feel, admittedly, wonderfully pleasant and invigorating. We may feel a eureka moment only to realize sometime later that we've made a mistake. Other such pleasant states can arise during meditation, such as the jhanas. These are deep states of meditative absorption that are quite pleasant in one way or another. And they can indeed feel profound, even temporarily liberating. But they're still conditioned states, impermanent states, and they don't signal the end of suffering. More problematically, we can also all too easily delude ourselves into believing that we've reached deep achievements in our practice through forms of psychological detachment that are not particularly healthy. This is often known as spiritual bypassing, the practice of trying to get ourselves not to feel what we're actually feeling, in order to maintain a kind of inflated ego that believes that we're better than we actually are. We say to ourselves, no, I'm not actually feeling that, even when the feeling subtly persists. Now, this is a form of delusion born of psychological detachment, and it's not healthy. But that said, I think we all go there from time to time, myself included. And note here that Detachment or detachment that I'm saying is not the same as non-attachment. I have a video about that I'll leave down in the comments if you want to hear more about that distinction. It's a critical one. In early Buddhism, enlightenment, or awakening as it's sometimes translated, is not about some kind of special feeling or unusual perception. Instead, it's about a fundamental and permanent transformation of the mind. Enlightenment is said to be accompanied by the direct seeing and knowing of certain things, such as the Four Noble Truths, non-self, and the dependent origination of all conditioned things. But crucially, what makes this knowledge enlightenment is its result, which is said to be unshakable and permanent. That is, the complete extinguishment of what are known as the three fires, or three poisons, of greed, hatred, and delusion. This means the permanent cessation of craving, of ego identification, and thus of dukkha. So any state or experience that we have, no matter how exalted it might be, that does not completely extinguish greed, anger, jealousy, resentment, and so on, is not enlightenment in the early Buddhist sense. I had a video where I went over some of this. I'll also leave that down below in the notes. Nirvana in the early texts is the state that results in the permanent transformation of enlightenment. Now, the word nirvana literally means blowing out or extinguishing. That is, the blowing out or the extinguishing of these three fires of greed, hatred, and delusion, or ignorance. It's not a place that you go to, nor is it really an experience, nor even a state of consciousness that you're in. It's simply the cessation of these defilements. In one sutta in the Pali tradition, the Buddha's foremost disciple in wisdom, Sariputta, remarks that nirvana is bliss. When Sariputta says this, Venerable Udayi challenges him. What is blissful about it if nothing is felt? Sariputta replies, the fact that nothing is felt is precisely what's blissful about it. Nothing is felt. It's not an experience. It's not a sensation, nor is it really a state of consciousness. The bliss of nirvana, therefore, lies not in some particular sensation that's associated with it, but in the ending of suffering itself, the profound relief that we find in the absence of craving and in the absence of these defilements. I think we can perhaps begin to see that truly attaining nirvana and full enlightenment is a very high bar. We may be able to convince ourselves for a short period of time, perhaps, that we're over greed and over hatred. But, you put ourselves into the right conditions, and we're going to see greed and hatred popping back up pretty quickly. Okay, so what about our experience of moving forward with our practice, with our efforts, say, to live a good life, to harm nobody, and to meditate regularly? Now, these efforts of moving forward should be celebrated. In the Buddha's eyes, they are highly valuable and undeniable signs that we are indeed making progress. We should recall that the path is a long and gradual one, and that lay people like ourselves living ordinary lives can do things that point us in the right direction, even if we're not actually renouncing everything and putting on robes and becoming monastics. But even so, we may reasonably want some tips, more tips, on what to keep an eye out for as we advance along this path. Well, I can speak for myself in that what I've noticed is a gradual reduction in greed and hatred at the very least. This is nowhere near a complete cessation of these things, of these problems, but through an awareness of the suffering involved in these states, I find myself getting angry less often, for example, with less intensity, and for somewhat shorter periods of time. In the same way, I can absolutely still be a greedy kind of person, but the greed that at least I feel in myself tends to be more circumscribed, and I find it easier to be content with the way that things are in my life. So I find that contentment comes more easily for me. So do moments of genuine peace, clarity, kindness, and compassion for others. Personally, I find myself less attached to outcomes, less swayed by worldly gains and losses. In all of this, my ability to understand the teachings, let's say the teachings of non-self or of conditioned impermanence, is more directly experienced than simply grasped intellectually. These are the kinds of real observable changes that can indicate that we're moving in the right direction. I don't think there's any point in looking for some kind of switch that flips to enlightenment for us. Instead, what we're going to find is a gradual process of mental change and purification. Or at least that's been my experience. Of course, I can't say that I've gotten all that far along the path myself, but this gradual purification is indeed clearly depicted in the early texts. Having said all that, let's get back to the original point. Obsessing over whether we've attained something specific can itself, ironically, become a new source of attachment or conceit for us, blocking our progress. It can lead to, indeed, presumptuous posturing, as my supporter wisely put it, and it can distract us from our actual work. The early Buddhist path encourages us to focus on the practice itself, cultivating such things in our lives as mindfulness, calm, and ethical conduct. Results are going to arise naturally from these kinds of practices. What we shouldn't do is to chase this kind of ghost or phantasm of a feeling of enlightenment. Instead, we should practice in a way that leads to our genuine freedom, by seeing directly what's skillful and unskillful for ourselves to be doing. In truth, there's nobody here to impress. There's no scoreboard in Buddhism, no external authority to certify our attainments, nor to castigate us for lagging behind. The ultimate judge is your own experience of freedom from these defilements. So, what's the upshot here when it comes to knowing whether or not we're enlightened? The upshot is to continue to live a good life, to practice kindness, to cultivate calm, to meditate, and to get to know the Dharma as well as we can. These very practices constitute the path. The promise of early Buddhism is not about ethereal states or mind-blowing experiences. It's about a profound and gradual liberation from suffering, one that manifests as the absence of greed, hatred, and delusion. So, instead of asking, "Am I enlightened?" the better question might be, am I seeing a reduction in greed, hatred, and delusion in my life? And when we ask this, keep in mind that external circumstances may weigh on how our progress appears to us. That is, some days, some years, it's easy to be calm. Others, it's not really so easy, and we have to give ourselves more leeway. So be compassionate with yourselves just as you would be with others in the same situation. Trust in the process and let the results speak for themselves over time. For a deeper dive into the fundamental problem that Buddhist practice aims to solve, see my earlier video on Buddhism's First Noble Truth. And if you're enjoying these videos, a like is always appreciated, and feel free to subscribe if that's the way you want to go. And we'll see you on the next video, and meanwhile, all of you, be well.